All right. Welcome to the strategy edition of the RecPoker Podcast. I am your guest host again this week, Rob Gardner, chiming in here for the great Jim Reed, who has just moved into his new studio and is traveling this week. He'll be back in the streets next week. For those of you guys that miss him, I know we do. We want to let you guys know that this pod is sponsored by our official sponsors, the amazing Running Aces Hotel Track and Casino up in, is it officially Columbus, Minnesota? Chris, is that what we call it? Okay.
Yep.
I've seen two different towns associated with it. I can leak unofficially. Okay. So you didn't hear from me. If it changes, you can't blame me, and you can't tell Jim I told all of you this, but unofficially, we've heard that RecPoker Weekend is going to be taking place the last weekend in January. I've gone to the last two. I don't know if I'm going to get up there for this one because of the Run Good Player of the Year chase I'm going for, but I can tell you it's an absolute blast. You will not find a casino where the hotel rooms are closer to the poker room ever, anywhere. The staff are great. Food's great. They've just renovated the place over the last 12 months. It's a lot of fun. Chris will be there, I think. Taylor will be there, I think. Some guy named Dan Kennedy who does squats between every dealer change. You'll know who he is by the description I just gave you. But it'll be a really fun time, so you'll definitely want to check that out. And you guys should check them out over at runaces.com. Tonight, we're joined by a special guest. We have Kim Kilroy here. If you guys don't know, Kim runs a study session on, I can't remember if it's Tuesday or Wednesdays. Go ahead and just prop that out.
Wednesdays when I'm not traveling, which only amounts to about half the year.
As someone that's done a lot of traveling in the last 6 months, I can relate. I will say I've heard wonderful things about that study session. And one of the reasons I was excited to get you on here is I've had multiple people ask when you were going to be a part of the strategy pod. And I was like, well, we're gonna get her in the mix. We're going to get her in here. So love to have you here tonight. Glad you're here. So tonight's topic is the turning point. And what I thought would be fun for tonight, have a little topical conversation where we just talk about different parts from our past in our poker career that kind of pushed us forward or steered us in the right direction to help us really improve and get to where we are today. Because I think a lot of poker players, and certainly us here in this panel at different times in our lives and our careers, have gotten stuck. We've gotten to places where we've kind of plateaued. And it's nice to hear from other people what pushed them through, what got them over the hump, or what was that thing that was holding them back from kind of getting to the next level. And it's a little bit different for everybody. You're going to see a wide range of answers from our panel here, but hopefully you'll find some things that might inspire you or push you in a different direction or help you get over the hump. And I'm going to start with Chris today because Chris has an interesting story here very early in his career about how he made a final table by luck boxing his way in and how that kind of spurred him on to get better at the game. So Chris, I'll let you kind of introduce that.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of in a local home game. I was not very serious about poker. It was 2013, and this friend of mine said, "Hey, let's go play in the anniversary tournament at Running Aces." And this was a 2-day thing. I'd never played in a big tournament like that. I'd barely played in a card room before. Showed up and played, and I did. I have never yet in my career run as hot as I did in this tournament. Like, it just was like, and I literally kind of thought you played poker by trying to make the best hand and then you win. Like, that was sort of how I was playing, and that was working because I was always making the best hand. And so I ended up making the final table of this, and I was playing with for those of you in the Minnesota poker scene, is Matt Alexander made that final table, Jason Sell made that final table, Brian Soja made that final table. So there's a bunch of crushers and little old me, and I was doing really well. And then two things happened. The first thing happened was I had pocket queens, and guy named Jason Sell kept raising me and kept blasting away. And I was like, well, I guess he has aces, so I just folded. And I mean, like now, I mean, like it was a terrible mistake I made at that final table to do that. And then I had kings. I got kings in against Brian Soja's tens, and the tens won. And I sort of had this reaction of like, wait, I had the bet. Wait, aren't I just supposed to win? I'm just supposed to win. And so that was like my introduction. So I both kind of loved the game, but then I kind of like, it got me going, like wanting to like learn a lot more. And so it was a big turning point to me, because it was when I started taking poker more seriously.
So what did you do with that? Right? Like this is, I assume this is going back. Give me a time frame roughly. Like
it's 2013. I just looked it up on Hendon.
Okay. So we're like 2 years past Black Friday, right?
Yeah.
Online poker is like merge, right? You're playing on one of the 37 merge skins. And if you're lucky enough to make money, you're cashing out through like Western Union from
Right.
Kazakhstan, right? Like, how do you, where did you go from there?
So, I mean, there certainly weren't the number of resources that there are now. And there certainly weren't as many tools and as many outlets and that kind of thing. But I distinctly remember, getting my hands on as many books. I've always been an avid reader, and that's really where I started. I was like, I got to learn more about this game. I want to like show up and not just like hope to win. I want to like figure out what these good players that everyone was telling me were doing. And that sort of started kind of that my biggest journey, just like trying to get better. And then once I started, well, we'll get into next steps in a bit.
You can go into it from here. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, once
the segue is good.
There was like another turning point for me was when I started learning about ranges, and the idea of ranges. That really dropped a coin in my mind about not just playing the two cards in front of you, but playing the situation and playing like a whole dynamic. The game just changed completely for me when I learned that. In fact, that's when I thought I was, oh, well, I understand this game completely. I've mastered it now. I understand ranges. So I must just be like so good that I can do it. And that was also a turning point when I learned that was probably a mistake.
Yeah, I'll put a +1 to the ranges. That was one of mine as well. We were joking in the green room. Like I remember the day that I found out that ace deuce offsuit wasn't an open under the gun, but king eight suited was, and I was just so confused at the time. And like I didn't realize how much that was negatively affecting my play. I just assumed like, oh, I'm playing these hands that have an ace. I can flop a top pair. I'm in a good spot, but I didn't realize just how many times I was just not flopping anything. And, this is before I'd learned about backdoor equity and barreling and all these things. And so it's one of those things where like, you can't put the cart before the horse. Like you can learn all of these fancy poker concepts, but if your ranges are still bad, it makes a lot of those concepts bad because the number of hands you're taking to flop, to turn, to river, defending against a 3-bet are so wide that you're already in such a, equity deficit, you can't overcome it. And it sucks a little bit because I think, for a game like poker, to have such a barrier of entry where like you really have to learn the most boring part of the game to kind of get over the hump, I think is intimidating for a lot of people. Not everybody's as good at memory. But it's just so important. And there are people out there that have done, we're 12 years past Chris's start and an unnumbered amount of years since mine. I won't put it out there and age myself, but things have gotten a lot better. There's a lot of like condensed ranges that are like a little bit easier to memorize, a little bit simpler, where the difference between that range and like the perfect GTO range doesn't really make that big of an EV difference. So if you're someone out there that's maybe kind of put that off or run away from it, there's some resources out there that are a little bit easier. Taylor.
Yeah, I mean that kind of echoes with like what my like main point was here too, which was ranges and like positional awareness. Like I think so much of us just like you get out and you play, and like you start to like piece this game of poker together, and you're trying to reverse engineer what you should be doing and see how others are playing, and these are winning hands, I want to get a winning hand, and you're just trying to play and go from there. So I think that was kind of the main point in my career, that like I started to take things seriously, and then all of a sudden it was like, wait a second, position matters. It's not just the cards that I have, it's where am I at? Am I the last person to act? Am I the first person to act? How does that impact what I should even be playing? I think that was like the main like turning point in my career to at least like start taking things seriously. And it's so huge to know those ranges, get those down, and understand what you should be doing. I've had people come to me in my coaching and go, hey, like, do you even like look at ranges anymore? And I was like, I play a lot, but like, believe it or not, I dedicate the first part of every single year to going through ranges. Like I just, every single year, every single 12 months, I'm going back and I'm reviewing ranges. I don't ever want to get stale in my ranges. And it's such an important part of the game that I don't think anyone should really get stale on their ranges. You're going to deviate back to like your comfort zone. So going back, reviewing those things, finding the spots that are out of your comfort zone, but you should be doing, is what you need to study and make sure you're keeping up with. So position, ranges, two huge beginning concepts that really changed how I was viewing the game.
So I would agree with that. And Rob, when I started poker, King 8 suited was not in the opening range under the gun. Just letting you know, back in the day.
Yeah.
When it was 3 times the big blind to open, it was not in the range.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one of the first things I ever studied was ranges. And I would dare to say that not having the proper ranges now in today's game leads to mistakes throughout the whole hand. So that's the cornerstone of learning poker, in my opinion, is the ranges and the positions and ranges. So I used to have Phil Gordon's little book, and I'd have it all highlighted from every position and what the ranges were, and it got drilled into me. And it was drilled into me so much that I've had a hard time opening that range to include the King 8 suited.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like muscle memory, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. And do you still have that book, Kim? Does that book exist in your household?
Well, I'm at the cottage now, where all things go that are old in my house. I think it's in the bookcase somewhere over there.
Very cool. That'll be a cool trip down memory lane at some point. And Kim, we'll kind of go into the next one here. You've done something that I think a lot of our listeners dream about doing, hope to do someday in some form or capacity, which is you've gone from a very successful career as a veterinarian and success there, and transitioned into a very successful poker career. So something that a lot of people want to do, but not very many people are actually successful at doing. And we were talking in the green room, one of the things you mentioned that kind of was a turning point for you there was taking it seriously, really putting in a lot of volume and playing a lot of poker. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I was like a full-time veterinarian and a full-time mother for many, many years. And then all of a sudden I found myself in a part-time job, and my kids have all left home. So now what am I going to do? So I took the knowledge of my love for math and my love for games, and I found bar league poker. So I started to go out to the bars 5 to 7 nights a week to play poker. So that was a huge learning curve for me. So just learning to be, and then I bought a whole bunch of books. So learning to raise appropriately when nobody else in the bar was raising. I found success in, I found success at the bar league, which kept me going and kept me interested in the game, and so much so that I was the highest point league earner in Canada in my first year of playing, and was invited to play in the LAPC Celebrity Invitational in Los Angeles at the Commerce Casino, which hooked me. That's probably that trip was my first travel to play poker, and it hooked me into what I do now, and that was 2011. So 14 years later, I'm still loving the travel to play poker. So that totally hooked me into the game. But it was the playing every night, almost every night for a whole year, that was really, really playing live was helpful in being able to play live and learning how tells and things like that. So that was pivotal for me for the start of it anyway.
Very cool. And that led to, we were talking in the green room as well, Kim has more rings here on the panel than any of us. So there you go. The proof is in the pudding. Taylor, you mentioned on your list of turning points, one of the things you mentioned was betting strategies. And one of the things I've enjoyed having strategy conversations with you is you do have this kind of cool, methodical way that you think through hands, not just going street by street, but kind of having a plan from pre-flop to river that's cohesive and consistent. Talk about how you got there and how you learned that, because I think everybody knows it's important, but it's a tall task to just, figure out how to crack into that and break the egg, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's honestly something that doesn't get talked about a lot in terms of like the betting strategies and like reasons for betting. I think is a big thing to like break down and try and understand. I forget the book, and I'm actually like really upset that I'm blanking on which book it was, but one of the classic poker theory books, and it broke down the toy game concept. The simple ace, king, queen betting concept of like, how often should you be doing these different things? And it's like, hey, if you've got a queen, like half the time you should be betting, and you're trying to get the kings to have a tough decision so that, every time you're betting with an ace, but half the time you're betting with a queen, it's the pot odds and like how you should be betting those different pieces. That concept really stuck with me because I think that's like the foundation of like how you should approach betting in poker. Because I think most of us, at least me specifically, if I was playing the toy game in poker concepts, I was betting the ace. Sometimes I was maybe betting the king, and then I was never betting the queen. And like, that's a terrible way of approaching how you should be betting, because you're like, I have the king, maybe I beat your queen, I should bet. And it's like, no, like you got to think about how to handle those. But that book also broke it down into multiple concepts. One was in position versus out of position. Like you should frame your betting, whether you're in position or out of position, totally differently. And then they expanded it from ace, king, queen to ace through deuce. And like, hey, how should you bet in these different spots? What should you bet with? What makes good bluff catchers in those spots? And like that concept of just like, why do you want to bet really like broke me down to the core, because that was a changer for me. I was thinking about things all wrong. It wasn't just bet when I have a good hand, check when I don't, call when I've got a draw that could beat your best hand in this particular spot. It's all these different concepts of like, well, if you're out of position, you really don't want to bet big, or you're like, you don't want to bet a whole lot of hands because it gives away information to the person in position. And if you're in position, well, you've got information from the out of position person. Now you should bet based off of these criteria. Just at a high level, like that's really just kind of what broke things down for me. And I just started to think about things totally different in how I should approach things in a poker hand.
If you had to learn that all over again today, where would you go to learn that? What would you do to grow in that or dig deeper?
I think Chris remembered the book for me. I saw it in the chat, Play Optimal Poker by Andrew Brokus. To me, that's the best resource I've ever seen for breaking that down. Other places that I've seen it, I've seen Ryan LaPlante through his Learn Pro Poker stuff, break it down and talk through some different things. He likes to break it down and talk about things on a spectrum of like, how good of a hand do you have? And if your opponent's here, should you be reacting and talking through that? That's good. To me, I liked the Play Optimal Poker by Andrew Brokus, that book that he had. If you got to stop and think as you go through it, but it's well worth it to go through and learn those things.
Very cool. And I believe, I don't know if Play Optimal Poker is in our bookstore on the website, but I know that Ryan LaPlante's website's a part of our Learning Partners program. That's a mouthful there. So you can head over to our website at RecPoker and check that out. Chris, Kim mentioned how getting a lot of volume and playing live and learning reads was a big part of her growth in the game. But you actually had a huge turning point when you started playing online more, and specifically tracking hands. So talk about kind of that part of your poker career and what turned for you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was really the big shift for me. Is like I decided that I'm busy a lot. It was hard for me to get to the card rooms. I was never going to get enough experience to get like as good as some of the players who had sort of beat me. So I really was looking for an avenue to try to like find opportunities to play more. And so started playing, kind of went in fits and spurts, but played online for a while and did not track hands. And I don't think that was all that helpful to me, honestly. I learned volume will teach you things in and of itself, but the real like game changer for me was going back and like in the cold light of day reviewing sessions that I had played. And I mean, there was just so like, it was almost embarrassing. I was like, the first time when I was doing it, I was like almost like kind of scared to do it or embarrassed to do it, because I would see so many mistakes and so many like, oh my God, if I was watching this player play and it wasn't me, I'd be like, oh, that player's not very good. And it was kind of like, but there was a lot of self-reflection, and that is hard. You can either choose to ignore it or you can choose to sort of do something about it. And that was a really big turning point for me to like actually start to like try to reduce the number of, so that when I went back to a future session, that it wasn't maybe as grim as the one I was just kind of watching play out.
Yeah, I had that too. I started tracking my hands online. I got Poker Tracker 4, and that was a huge thing for me. And I was building up hands and then reviewing things and, studying all at the same time. I remember I got a database review from someone in a coaching package, sent my hands. We went through, reviewed some things, and he's like, hey, like, honestly, like a lot of these things look great, but I found, some of these spots, and we started reviewing things. And then I just kept asking because it became a theme. I was like, when were these hands from? And it was all the early parts of my hand histories that I was just like getting way out of line, doing weird things, just nonsensical bets. And like, I fixed it eventually, but it was really funny going back and looking at things and being like, honestly, that makes no sense. I have no idea why I would do this. What was the date? Oh yeah, that was like one of my first like 10,000 hands that I recorded on here. That was me just playing terrible. But then it like quickly corrected itself. So it's really funny how that can come through.
Yeah, I remember the first few times I did hand history reviews, how embarrassing it was, because my thought process was really good, but my autopilot was horrific. And I was so consistent at being inconsistent, where, I'd get to 6 or 7, 8 tables and I probably should have only been playing 4 or 5. And I just fold hands I shouldn't fold and call in spots I shouldn't call and make bets that I would literally go through them. They'd be like, hey, why'd you do this? I don't know. I have no idea. I cannot fathom why I did this, but it's here. Oh, and then I did it 20 minutes later too. And so I definitely had some tough coaching sessions where it was like, you need to fix this. So it is very much that kind of putting you under the microscope and really seeing all of the mistakes we're making and inconsistencies and whatnot. Speaking of, one of the things that we were talking about in the green room too is the different ways that people learn, and everybody's a little bit different when it comes to learning and education. Like some people like learning from reading books. I would rather gouge my eyes out than read a book. Personally, I hate books. My wife loves books. Some people, like videos. Some people like audio podcasts. Some people like to do things in person. Kim was talking about how some of the in-person study sessions she went to were really effective. And what was really cool is you've been to 2 study sessions that I don't think exist anymore. So you might be the only person on the planet that's actually been to both of these study groups.
So I probably own at least 25 poker books, none of which I finished.
Yes.
I belong to multiple training sites with hundreds of videos available, and can only stomach getting through a few. and so I learn best by in person. So huge for me was the WPT boot camps back in the day. So this was in probably the early to mid, it's probably the mid 2010s, like probably 2011 to 15, the WPT boot camps. Those were in-person training, 3-day intensive training programs, which I found really helpful. And then fast forward to about maybe 8 years later, I went to Solve for Why, 3-day in-person training. And those were I came out of those and won some of my biggest events ever after both of those. After the last day of a WPT boot camp in Aruba, everyone had left. My flight wasn't home till the next day. I played an online game that I had qualified for. It was on Party Poker at the time, and final tabled and had my biggest score online, which was like 23,000 or something like that.
Wow.
I had just had all of that training from the whole 3 days before. And from Solve for Why, I came out and won for 2 of the sessions I had. I came out and won a tournament right after. So it just sort of stays with me. That sort of training is best for my learning process. And I'm still trying to get through the books, but they're still there. So
I actually found a Super System book in my basement a couple months ago, and it's in pristine condition because it has not been opened more than I think twice. I'm curious, Chris and Taylor. I haven't been to any live seminars, but I have done like live private coaching sessions. And similar to Kim, when I've done like intense live private coaching sessions, I've almost always gone on a little bit of a run after it. I'm curious if you guys have experienced that, where like those types of sessions really kind of hone you in and get you sharp.
Yeah. I love Learn Pro Poker. I became a lifetime member when they put that possibility out there. Humble brag, was my biggest live cash up until about a month ago. But my previous biggest live cash came like 2 weeks after joining Learn Pro Poker, and kind of like deep diving through the basic courses that they had there. So I've always said, after I go through big study times, like I run way better than I ever have. I think it's luck, but like if Kim's saying it and it's happening other places, maybe it's not luck. Maybe it is a thing that you go through those big study spurts and then all of a sudden like you can get the results to come through.
how do you maintain your focus for watching videos? Like when it's a video training program, like, how do you use your time, and how much of do you try to watch at a time to sort of stay focused?
I do short spurts. I think you're about to say and take notes. I'm not a note taker. I've never been. I went through high school, went through college. I just can't take notes. It doesn't really work for me. But I do short spurts for online stuff. If a video is over an hour long, I don't want to watch it. And if I do, I want to break it up into multiple parts. I will lose interest. I will fade away. I won't be paying attention. And I know that's the case. But there are times where mentally something like switches with me, and I can for hours and just go. And I try and embrace that whenever that comes through. But I know if I try and force that, I'm not retaining anything. I'm not really learning anything. I'm just kind of wasting my time when I do stuff with that. So I do pay close attention to where I'm at mentally and incorporate that with my studying.
And do you try to take something that you've just learned and try to apply it right away in your game?
I try not to, right? Like, I feel like you force mistakes if you're trying to force certain things. But I will try and understand the concept of what's going on. I won't avoid a spot. Yeah. Like, if I go and I'm like, hey, I kind of did this early in my career where it was like, I want to be better at 3-betting. Like, I want to 3-bet more. I want to 3-bet wide. So I'd learn about 3-betting, and then I'd be like, I'm going to go to the casino. I'm going to fire up a tournament, and then I'm going to 3-bet. And it's like, I feel like when you force things like that, it just doesn't come through. But if you understand that, but then just go, okay, like, I think I'm ready. Like, let me go to this daily and see what pans out. Then, and you have that as your like back of your mind, the thing that you just learned, it can help, but you can't always force spots like that. You can start simple. The 3-betting one seems like the most doable, but if you're like, I want to find spots to check raise more than I would have previously, like, you're lucky if you get one of those in a poker tournament. Like, it just doesn't occur all that much. So you can, but you can't in certain ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the first like serious video course I ever got was Raise Your Edge. And I watched probably 80% of the videos and learned nothing. And then watched them a second time and learned a couple things. And then I think it took me like the third or fourth time watching it to really have it sink in. Now, those videos were very deep and very meaty, and they were not meant to be like easily consumed. I mean, it was not like casual listening, and it wasn't broken into small segments. I think there's, various training sites out there have gotten better at this over time. But I did have to take lots of notes, and I did really have to sit with the material for a while before it sunk in. And so I've preferred, like I said, I haven't been to live stuff, but I've preferred more of the live coaching type sessions, because the nice thing with those is you can ask questions, you can interact, right? Like, if you don't understand something, you can say, what are you talking about, right? What is this capped thing you keep saying? What does it mean? Explain it to me in practical terms. And that interaction, I think, is so important.
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest breakthrough I've had recently, I've had a pretty nice stretch in the last bit. And I think the biggest thing that has helped me, so I worked, did some private coaching with Matt Affleck, but he also had me, again, not one of our learning partners, and I'm going to recommend it nonetheless, the BBZ course on multi-way play really helped me. Like, and we were working on that side by side. We were looking, so he had me go do the course, come back to the next session. We're going to look at your hands and talk about, so like, we didn't waste the time that I could do on my own, sort of learning this stuff. I just knew that I had homework to show up to the next session for it. And I know for a fact that both of the deep runs, but certainly the deep run I had in Vegas, were a direct result of shifting and changing the way I played multi-way hands, which are so common in the kinds of tournaments that we're playing in. And that was a big revolution for me in terms of like my game, in terms of thinking about, because I think I'd really focused on heads up play. I think it's really important to do so. You learn the aspects of the game. You learn about in position, out of position. You learn about all the things Taylor was talking about, ranges and bets, but a lot of it changes once we start getting 3 and 4 handed, and you really have to understand how to approach those dynamics. And that was a huge change or shift for me.
Yeah, I really can't stress enough. Like, I think people look at private coaching and they get a little intimidated by the price of it. Especially some of the like really top coaches, you know, can be $100, $150, $200 an hour. It's like, oh, it's so expensive. But it's like, if you look at how much the even like casual poker players spend in buy-ins over the course of a year, it's really not that much. And it's like, if you could spend that money and get your game to a point where you're either losing less or maybe even making money, like it really is an investment. And it's not just an investment from a financial standpoint of like, oh, well, you know, if I spend money on a private coach, then I can play and make more money. The game's just more fun to play when you know how to play it correctly, when you can make moves and you're playing confidently and you're doing things that are working. It's just more fun. So, you know, I would highly encourage you to check out, you know, we've got over on the RecPoker website, we've got a list of private coaches. Some of them are in this room here that you can hire and learn from. So if you're hearing anything in this podcast that resonates, you head over to the website and check that out, because it really does, I think, make a significant impact. One of the things on my list, I'm curious what the rest of our panel here thinks, that was a huge one for me, was not giving people too much credit. And this one is another shout out to Ryan LaPlante over at Learn Pro Poker, because very early in my my coaching days with him, he was trying to really get me to play these really exploitative strategies, like betting small on flop. And I just always was like, well, I don't want to bet small on flop because like it's obvious I don't have anything. You know, if I'm betting big with my strong hands and betting small with my weak hands, they're just going to know. And he was like, no, they're not. It's like they're not paying attention. Like even some of the good players aren't paying attention. And I didn't believe him at first, and I had to like really get into it. And as I started doing it more and more and started doing other exploits he was teaching me, it blew my mind how little people were paying attention, especially in online poker. Like it's so easy to shark scope somebody and see them, you know, with like a graph that goes up and a good ABI, and you're like, oh, this player's a good player, and you mark them in you color code them. But like they may be a winning player, but they also might be like 15 tabling while watching football on TV and eating popcorn, and like all of their decisions are autopilot. And they might not be paying attention to the fact that on table 13, you bet quarter pot instead of third pot, right? But here I am feeling exposed. Like the person across the table from me is literally one tabling and hyper focusing and has a book of notes on me. And they're like, oh, he deviated, I'm going to punish him. And that really opened the game up for me, because not only did I find these exploits effective, but I started finding all of these other things that people weren't paying attention to, that I really got to take advantage of. So I'm curious if any of you have experienced that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the best examples for it, but I know that's a thing that like I always insert myself into what my opponent might be thinking. And like I've got to stop doing that. I do it way too much. I do it in a lot of different aspects. Like in fantasy football, I do it all the time. That's like, oh, hey, I heard so-and-so might be a good sleeper. And then like, they're going to think that this person's a good sleeper. And then I've got to like take them way too early. And like, I get in my own head, and then I go in there and I draft someone in fantasy football, and they're like, who is this guy? And I'm like, oh, well, I just leveled myself. So don't level yourself. Like it happens in poker too, where it's like, oh, like, hey, they check raised me here, but they could definitely be check raising with this other stuff. So I got to call. And then if they knew that I might be calling, they're probably going to continue again on the turn. And then, well, if they knew that, then they're probably going to just bomb the river. And then also they bomb the river. And I'm like, oh, you flopped a set. Oh, why didn't I? Yeah, you were just thinking normal. And I leveled myself into getting stacked. So yeah, I need to stop that. That's probably one of my weak points in poker.
Yeah, I think I agree with Taylor. Rob, I don't do that enough. I think I'm consistently giving my opponents. I think certain opponents maybe deserve it, but certain opponents, I think I'm giving them way too much credit. And I'm in the same boat as you, Taylor. But I find it where it really starts to strike me is in high where ranges are wide situations like blind versus blind, or like when I'm on the button and I've opened and the small blind 3-bets me, like, and I know, oh well, this is a spot where they're supposed to, because I'm opening wide and they're supposed to 3-bet me a lot, and so now I maybe I need to do some more 4-bets to and often they're just 3-betting me because they looked at their cards and they were good, and so like I do that too often where I apply knowledge to a situation or apply to an opponent where they're not even thinking on that level.
Kim, question for you, because this translates into live too, and one of the things I keep trying to work on, but I keep struggling with, is I'll be playing in a tournament, and new guy will get moved to the table, and I'll see this like young guy, like late 20s, Bose headphones, got a backpack, sits down, and I'm like, oh crap, now this table's ruined. I got this crusher coming to the table, he's young, and then he immediately limps under the gun, and I'm just like, see, like, why? Like, I get so worked up about people's live appearances, and I just always assume that if somebody even remotely looks like a poker player, that they're gonna mess up the whole table, when I'm playing in fields where like most of the good poker players don't come to these. Do you ever run into that?
Well, yeah, most of the crushers are in their 40s, but so,
fair point.
Yeah, no, I just play every person as I watch them and see what they do. If they're gonna limp, then I just immediately tag them. And it doesn't matter what they look like, really, because I know from my own look that looks can be deceiving, and that you just have to look at how someone actually plays.
One of my former coaches, I won't say which one, I'm not going to dox them, but they said, just assume everybody's bad until they prove they're good. I haven't gotten there yet. I need to.
No, I actually, that's how I play. In except when I'm playing higher buy-in tournaments, then I assume everybody's good until they prove they're bad.
Yeah, that's more than fair. Another one of the items on the list here that I'm curious about is ICM. And this is going to come off arrogant. I don't want it to sound arrogant. I never really studied ICM. Because it was kind of intuitive to me, just this idea of like, hey, the more chips we have, the less chips are worth, and you like need to be a little bit more careful. If you're second in chips at a final table, you don't want to go out 8th. When you're 9th in chips at the final table, you have nothing to lose. I did spend a little bit of time working with Bet on Drew back in 2018, where we looked at some like ICM solves and kind of came up with some heuristics, but largely it's been just kind of, I don't know. I don't want to call it common sense, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And because I play so many small field tournaments online, I've just been in these spots thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And so I'm kind of honed in on it. So I'm curious to hear from, Taylor and Chris, you both listen to this. I'm curious to hear two things. One, what specifically changed in your game when you learned ICM? And two, how did you study it? Was it literally running ICM calculations and like running spots again and again with calculators? Or was it more of a conceptual learning that kind of turned the corner for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's not that great of resources out there to talk through ICM spots. It gets complicated. A lot of them are mostly just pre-flop. But I think from that, you can kind of get the sense of how you should be handling different situations as it relates to ICM. But I remember I didn't know, didn't care about ICM for the longest time. Two of my final tables that I made like early on in my career. One was the one that I mentioned earlier that I made after starting to study through Learn Pro Poker. I went back and like that one was actually like streamed on Twitch. So I went back and watched some spots, and like I was annoyed with like how I approached certain spots. I was like, why am I doing these things? And the one that I made before that, which was a small field buy-in, like it was a final table, but it was like 1,500 that I cashed for. So it really wasn't anything that big, but I made like probably a huge blunder, not being last in chips, but having, 10, 12 big blinds. And I just jammed ace-8 offsuit because I've got 10, 12 big blinds. That's the right thing to do, is to jam ace-8 offsuit and, pick up the blinds and chip up and do that. But at a final table, no, like you shouldn't be doing that. Like that's just a cardinal sin. So it's like when I started to learn through ICM, I absolutely love ICM. It's what makes me play tournaments. And I think I have a bit of that intuitive nature that you talked about, Rob, but I think you also need to like pay attention to situations, study some things, and understand like how tight you should be in certain spots. How loose can you be in other spots to help that out? Because even if you have the intuitive part to it, it really helps to know like how much you should be moving away from what your norms are. I think people play way too much to their norms when it relates to final tables. And it was one thing that like I feel like I need to get way better at, because I feel like playing live, people are terrible with ICM at final tables. I'm curious if, Chris, how you feel, because you just made the Hollow Scream final table. You got second place. Like, do you feel like people were making like huge mistakes as it relates to ICM? Because that's how I felt whenever I've seen any sort of live table play out.
Yeah. No, I do. I think so. And I think, yours included. I probably made some mistakes there as well. But I think the thing that I think people play to what they're accustomed to, right? And they're like, well, I don't want to shake this up too much. Yeah, maybe I'll play a little tighter. Or if I've got a big chip stack, maybe I'll play a little looser. But I think the thing that was so dramatic for me in terms of learning about ICM is like how dramatic the influence can actually be on our play. And how it is all, when I look at some of those sims or I look at some of the breakdowns, it can be just wildly dramatic, like so counterintuitive. And also the sizings are, I think, the thing that people get wrong the most. We're so used to sort of the way we play poker and having this sort of approach to bet sizing that we don't really make big adjustments when we get into these spots. But you can min click a 3-bet at a final table and have that be you can do that almost out of position. Like you can go like 2.5, like to like 4.5 or 5 big blinds out of position as a 3-bet to a min open. And that can be correct. And that is so bad in early stages of a tournament. And there's a lot of things that start changing in terms of the dynamic of play. And I think people don't really know that stuff at all.
Yeah, I think those are really, really great points. And I can think back to some of the final tables that I've played over the last 4 or 5 months. And I've both seen some absolutely insane things, and I've also made some absolutely insane fold. Because the other side of this ICM is adjusting to the opponent, right? Like you can know that like the proper calling range in blind versus blind when you get shoved on is whatever, right? But if your opponent's shoving way tighter than they're supposed to be, it shifts everything. And Jay Carfiello, VA Venom Online, is a really close friend of mine. We talk poker regularly. And we have this thing we call like the hands we tell nobody, because we get in these spots, especially ICM spots, and it's like if I posted this online that I made this fold or I made this call, I would get absolutely shredded. but I'm right because I'm up against somebody who's literally shoving 3% of hands in the small blind, and so like I can exploitatively fold ace nine suited in a spot where like it's just so obscene, and so we just have these spots that like we joke about because yeah, it really pushes the game to extremes. I do remember when I learned that min bet c betting was a thing. To your point, Chris, in ICM, and again, one of those things where I was just like, "There's no way this is effective. There's no way that like people aren't going to adjust to it." And then I started using it at final tables, and I'm like, "This is insane!" Like, I'm getting just as much fold equity as betting half pot in the level 3 of a tournament. Like, what is going on? So I could see that is really, really cool as how that's impacted both of your games. Mental game is one that we all kind of talked about in the green room. And it's kind of a vague topic. For me specifically, it started in the glory days of streaming and not, pitching a fit and acting like a crybaby every time my aces got cracked with 12 people left on a stream with 30 people watching. But it evolved into a lot more than that. It evolved into having clear focus, being patient, staying positive when things go wrong. Not because of some necessarily like manifestation, like, oh, well, if I'm positive, I'm going to change the cards type thing, anything mystical like that. But all the negativity takes up bandwidth in your brain and it limits your ability to focus on other things. And I had the privilege of working with a mental game coach for 6 months and then got the Prime Mind app. And I think I've showed people I'm up to like, I don't know, 120,000 minutes of meditation over the last like 6 years. It's become a mainstay for me. And I've used it not only for poker, but for other things in life, discipline and dietary stuff and whatever. So I'm curious to hear from each of you how mental game has shifted your course and how you've used it to better yourselves. Who wants to go first?
I will. I'll go first. I have to take back something I said. The only book that I've ever finished was The Poker Mindset. And it was the second book that I ever read in poker. And it has stayed with me forever and allowed me to stay off tilt and to just, I keep going back to the basics of it's a game of poker and you can't get mad at this, you want that call, all of those things that put people on tilt. And it just so helped me, and it's helped me for the last 15 years. So I read that one, and I also read The Mental Game of Poker, and those two were actually probably helped me more than any of the strategy books.
Strong vote. Taylor.
I mean, I've probably got bad habits when it relates to the mental game. Like, I try to do all the things that you've mentioned in terms of like, yeah, don't take it personal. Don't go through these things. I mean, I still get upset as we go through it. I've never done anything to train my mental game. And that's probably a miss, to be completely honest. However, I mentioned this when I was talking about studying earlier. I am very well aware and have gotten way better at understanding my mental state and where I'm at with things and not forcing anything. When it's with studying, it's like, hey, if I don't want to study, if I don't have an interest in this, man, it is hard to get me to do that. And believe it or not, I've got a kid who takes right after me with that, and I see it, and I understand the struggles that my parents probably went through when I was a young kid, trying to get me to do things that I didn't want to do. So I've become aware of those things. I understand my mental state, and a lot of times I have to have things going well at home. I have to, be in a good spot with my wife. I can't ever like get in a disagreement with her and then think I can go play poker and not have it affect me, because it'll linger.
Right.
I need to be in a good spot with everyone in my family. I need to, have rest. I need to be in a good spot with my work. Like, I try and keep all those things at the right balance, hone out the bad, focus on the good, and then allow that to let me go play poker as a hobby, and then try and tell myself, even after I bust to a 2-outer, that this is fun. This is what I want to do. And it's all good.
Yeah, I love that. I love the sort of whole life picture that you're painting there, and I think that's one of the key things. I mean, I've never done any like mental game coaching or approach in terms of poker, but I have observed a ton of players where it really impacts their game, and I observed it in myself. Honestly, the online world was a bit more of a pressure cooker for me in terms of that sort of like understanding that about myself, because you're sitting there alone playing by yourself. It's just you and a computer screen, and you're playing much more volume, so things can go wrong in sort of like rapid fashion, right? You can bust 4 tables in like a few minutes, and all of them can be bad beats, and you can be like, this can't possibly have ever happened to anyone else. Why am I so unlucky? And all this sort of stuff. But I think the biggest key thing that I see amongst what I've observed in the live world, and I think in the online world as well, is just the really great players, the players who are consistently making final tables, the players who are always showing up in those spaces. They never feel bad for themselves. They're never grumbling well, occasionally they are, but they're rarely grumbling under their breath. They are playing the stack they have in front of themselves. Even if they've just gone from 100 big blinds to 10, they're trying to make those 10 count, and maybe they'll piss and moan once those 10 get dusted off, but they're trying to build it back rather than worry about where they were. And that's something I really try to focus on when I'm playing. It's just really trying to be in the moment and with the stack that I have, because I think that's the biggest mental challenge for me, at least, is just that sense of like, the world's out to get me. I'm so unlucky. How could this possibly happen? All those kinds of like back channel chatter that can start happening in your mind. It does you no good, and it puts you in a bad mental place, and you're not able to approach the hand that you're playing now.
Yeah, for sure. The last one I want to hit on quick, because we're running out of time here. Taylor, you talked about board textures and blockers, and these are kind of more advanced topics than your kind of run-of-the-mill poker topics. So obviously I want you to talk about those and how they've helped your game, but kind of zoom out a little bit and just talk about how you approach more advanced topics in poker, and how the top end of the educational side of poker can really hone your game in.
Yeah, I'm going to talk through this a bit, but I'm going to tee you up because I know you talked about something in the green robe, and I'll leave it hanging there and let you hammer it home when we get there. But board textures was huge for me to understand how I should be approaching hands post-flop. Obviously, board textures comes in post-flop with you needing a board texture to have the concept be applicable. But I viewed things so generically in terms of like, where was I at in this specific spot? And board textures can change that in terms of what might change in the future. And to me, that was a big piece to think about and to understand, and use that with the other thing that I talked about earlier in terms of betting strategies to help dictate how you should approach specific areas. Like, to me, previously, it was like, I've got, ace king on a king high flop, I'm solid. But if it's, ace, or if it's king 7 deuce or king 5 6 with a flush draw, or king 5 6 all monotone, all very different things, and all things for you to like react and behave differently to and have different strategies for. So it's a matter of like looking through those different pieces and understanding not just I'm in this spot with this hand, what am I going to do? But this is a spot what is my general strategy? The kind of a zoom out, like you're talking about, but like, what would my strategy be in this spot? And then dictating, what does my hand now want to do if this is my holistic strategy? Because it let me break apart from that singular hand that I was in, and then like zoom out and really like figure out, like, I need a bigger strategy for how I should be approaching this. Yeah, you might have ace king, but here's how you want to handle these spots if you didn't have ace king, if you had these other hands, and how you would generally want to be approaching that. So to me, that was a big thing to help break down my mental barriers of getting too stuck on what I was exactly playing, not the situation, generally speaking. And the other one was blockers, because I think I was approaching situations of understanding when I should bluff very differently. And that really changed once I started to learn GTO and GTO Wizard. And blockers really help you understand why you should be doing specific things. And that really broke it down for me. That's like, oh, yeah, no, it really makes sense. Not just the fact that I have the ace of hearts on this 3-heart board, but when I have the ace of hearts, you don't have the ace of hearts. And therefore, my strategy when I have the ace of hearts can behave this specific way. And when I don't have the ace of hearts, then that means your opponent could have the ace of hearts. And then we have to approach it differently. Like, there can be specific cards that are very important to have or not have in certain situations. And that's why GTO Wizard or other GTO apps will choose the avenue that they want to go down. So to me, that was a big thing for me to break down and understand was, hey, blockers or the cards that you have can be really important.
I was told that blockers aren't real.
I will constantly say that, but I only mean it as a joke. They're very real. They're a thing.
It's a funny concept because, like, I think it comes down to people assume that they're like invincible. It's like we're talking about 3 to 5% edges, right? Like taking the ace of hearts out and knowing they don't have the nut flushes. Like, it doesn't mean they never have a flush. It just means they're less likely to have it. And one of the funny things with the blockers too, especially in the live poker realm, is how many times you'll get to a spot and you're like, okay, the board ran out this way. I'm unblocking all of his missed draws. I'm blocking some of his nutted hands. I've got a really good combo. I'm going to go 2x pot here on the river. And then they just snap call you with 4th pair because they're just never folding a pair. And it all goes to waste. But that's to where, like, the situational side of it is important. And, as you get to later stages of the tournament, cream rises at the top, you start playing better players. Those things become more and more important. And to Taylor's point, what he was hinting at was the why. And that was probably, of all the things that have like opened up my poker career, the one that opened it up the most was when I stopped just looking at solvers and just looking at, ranges and what to do on this board. And I was able to zoom out and learn what GTO was actually trying to do. Because in a way, like, if you don't understand why GTO works the way it does, then the solver stuff is noise, right? We're never going to be able to memorize and internalize these colorful charts that people look at on GTO Wizard when there's literally infinite combinations of situations that we can get into. But as you start to learn the whys, back to Taylor's point, then it makes it easier to understand how blockers play in, how board textures play in, why GTO uses certain combos. And what's really cool and what really unlocked it for me is once I understood, like, hey, the smaller I bet, the more my opponent is supposed to raise. Well, that's kind of an important fact, because now if I bet small and I have the type of opponent that never raises me, that's huge, right? That is a leak on their part that I get to take advantage of. And learning things like that allowed my creativity to go up, allowed me to kind of advance the way I think about poker in a lot of different ways, and kind of got me to the point where I was kind of starting to create my own strategies. So I would highly encourage anyone, if you're out there and you're like, oh, I need to get GTO Wizard and I need to run a bunch of solves. I don't want to say that stuff doesn't have value, but I think there is more value in finding a private coach or a training site that really breaks down GTO into heuristics and teaches you kind of the rules and the spectrums and what's working from behind the scenes. And then once you've learned that, stuff like GTO Wizard and some of these more advanced topics can have more value. Anybody else have anything to chime in on that? Any other tips or tricks? Any other comments from the panel? All right. Well, I thought this was cool. It's where does the Rob Gardner donk move come from? We don't have time for that one, but it does come from learning the GTOYs. Well, on behalf of RecPoker, Jim, who couldn't be here tonight, our official sponsors, Running Aces. Again, please check them out at runaces.com. Please don't make plans for the last weekend in January so you can come out to RecPoker weekend. On behalf of all of them, thank you, everybody, for being here, being part of the RecPoker podcast. Make sure you come back next week when Jim Reed will be back. We'll see you guys soon.